In today's Quick Thursday tip, we're going to talk about SharePoint columns when you're using it as a data source for PowerApps. So we're going to talk about the right and the wrong way to create them. Make sure you understand that the type of column really depends or will really control how things show up in your app. And just a bunch of little stuff that I want you guys to know about when you're using SharePoint as your data source for your PowerApps. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with PowerApps 911, those guys. And today we're going to talk about SharePoint columns as they relate to your PowerApps list. So a lot of you like to use SharePoint as your data source for your PowerApps, and you go and build custom lists for it. I mean, there's a lot of little things I need you to know that if you build your SharePoint list these ways, make these slight little tweaks, it's going to make your life a lot easier over on the PowerApps side. So we're going to talk about things like column names, right? With spaces versus no spaces. We're going to talk about the different types of columns and the ramifications that they have. Maybe I'll hit on lookup columns for a second. Just a bunch of these little things, and we're going to do it really fast, right? We're not going to build a full-blown app. We're just going to go in and understand this topic. So let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Over here on my desktop, we're at our SharePoint site, and the first thing I want to do is create a list. And so there's like 1,000 ways to do it, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say add an app. And then after a second list pops up, I'm going to say custom list. And then we're going to give it a name, and we're just going to call this QTT, right, for Quick Thursday Tip Demo. And then we're going to say create here. And so your list name, not a huge deal whether or not it has a space, so don't worry about that one too much. But what I want to get into now that we've created it, let's scroll way down here to QTT. Where is, I got to remember my alphabet, there you go. And if we open up this list, what I want to first harp on, this is the main reason I made this video, was when you add a column, you cannot create the column with a space in the name. I mean, you can, but it causes you so much grief and confusion. So let's talk about that. So the first thing I'm gonna do over here is I'm gonna go to this screen and list settings. I could use the add column there, but I don't know, I'm old school, so I like to do it this way. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna say create a column. And so let's create a column and let's set it to first name, like that, right? So first space name, and then say create. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a second column called middle name. And so for middle name, we're going to create it without the space, like so. All right, that looks good. And so we'll say okay there. And then last but not least, so we got first name, middle name without a space. And then let's go ahead and create last names. Oops, so let's create column right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to also create last name without a space. So if we do this now and we say, all right, cool. If we go back over here, you can see that first name, well, this looks really bad in SharePoint. If no one's ever going to access the list from SharePoint, then who cares? But if you don't like this, if you're like, no, sometimes I want to go over here and I want to see this with a space in between. We're going to leave middle name alone, but let's go fix last name. So what you can do is you can go back over here and do list settings. And if we click on last name now, you can add the space. And you're like, well, Shane, why don't you just create it with a space to begin with? Great question. So the key here is I want you guys to focus your eyes right here, right? You see the mouse kind of the bottom middle spinning? So I'm going to hover over these column names and I want you to see what happens. So if I hover over first name, after it renders, you see down there, I'm going to highlight it on the video, field equals first underscore x 0020 underscore name, right? So what it is they had to encode that space, and then encode the space, it is that gosh awful thing, which is really painful to type, remember, and find later. If we look at middle name, field equals middle name, right? No space because it has no space. That's what we expect. But if we look at last name, oh, last name also has no space. So the key thing here is that the way that the column is written, when you create it is what matters most, okay? So when I created it as last name without the space, the field got provisioned under the hood as last name with no space in it. Then I edited the field to put the space in, and guess what? It did not break that, right? The field never changes down at the bottom, even though visually now it shows up as last name. If we go back over here to QTT demo, perfect. And if you're like, oh, then can I just go fix first name, right? We can't. So if we go over here to first name and we remove the space, is that going to change anything? No, right? So first name, if you look at the bottom, still has its space. Even if you completely change this to be like, the first name is, right? If we do this, it is still going to show first name as first x20 underscore name. So this is really important. This causes so much confusion for people that are using PowerApps because some of the functions are friendly and they will just show you the name and you're like, oh, no big deal. But some of them, like I'm looking at sort by columns, right? Sort by columns does not use, it uses this fancy name. It uses this first X20. And so it's really hard sometimes to play the matching game when you don't know what it is. So create your SharePoint column names with a purpose and create them nice and tight with no spaces. And then over in your Power App, it'll be a lot easier to use after the fact. Okay, so that was the first big thing I wanted to do. The other thing that I wanted to take a minute to talk about is let's talk about column types. So, because when you go to create a column, right, there is a dozen different ways that you can make a column. My advice to you is if you were creating this SharePoint list just to be a data source for your Power App, then there's only a few column types that I use. I use the single line of text, I use the number column, I use the date and time column. Those are the only column types that I try to use. The reason is those are all simple or straightforward column types. They don't have any of this complexity. If you use things like a choice column, well then to get the choices, you have to know the special choices function to pull that over into your Power App. And when you reference that column, you never reference the column name, you reference column name.value. You cause yourself a lot of extra work, whereas if the only way people are ever going to interact with this SharePoint data is via your app, you can code things like the different choices in a drop-down over there and then just store them in a text field. And that's going to make your life easier. It's going to make it more, all your functions more delegable and all of those fun things. So typically speaking, we're going to use single line of text, number, date, and time. You can use the other column types. They're all supported. I have a video on complex column types and how to work with them, but they require more effort. And who wants to put out more effort? Not me. So, and if you're wondering about column types and how they fit in, or maybe your delegation, like, what's that? Right? I'm going to put a link out there for you to the PowerApps delegation documentation. And here you can see they tell you what are the different types of data types, you know, so date and time, image, complex, number, text. So it's kind of giving you an idea how these columns are worked with, because then down here you can see that certain functions like filter is delegable to a text. And it's like filter to a complex. Well, no, there's a whole bunch of, you know, asterisks, right? Asterisks mean no, never mean yes. That's the way I look at it. But you can see that, you know, things like number and text, they're pretty flexible. Starts with, right? If you want to create like full text searching type of scenarios, well, you can't do full text, but you can do what it starts with. That is supported with a text column, but not with some of those other types of columns as well. So keep that in mind. Column types really matter when you're creating your SharePoint list. If you want to learn more about using SharePoint as a data source or building apps on SharePoint in flows, I have a whole class for that over at training.poweraapps911.com. So you can go over there and check out that class. It's pretty cheap. Give you a way to, you know, kind of learn Power Apps from the eyes of a SharePoint administrator like me. You know, I wrote 6 books on SharePoint. I've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. With that, I would say, you know, if this is helpful, leave me comments below. You have questions, I always answer all of them. And sometimes it might take me a week or so to catch up, but I respond to all the comments. So leave me ideas about what you would like to see. Maybe I can expand on another one of these concepts, go further for you, especially this new quick Thursday tip format. These little 5-7 minute videos give me an opportunity to get out more topics, right? And I guess with all that, I'm just going to say thanks and have a great day. Before you go, be sure to click on the subscribe button over here so that way you'll be notified when new videos come out. If you need any help or you want to work together, whether your problem is big or small, check us out at PowerApps 911. We do it all. I rhymed. Or if you're looking for more formal training offerings, we have those linked up here somewhere. So check them out. Thanks and have a great day.